upside down in the last 3 weeks, and I just don't know what to make of it.
So start with the date, time, location, what you're doing there.
September 2017, and I'd headed off, and I'd planned it months ahead that I was going to go off to a 7-day solo camp. I often do that, but this time I thought I'll make it twice as long and stay out there for a good week. And I was on my mate's property in Cattai, just fishing. I was fishing for bass all week in my kayak. I hadn't caught fish all week, and it was day 5, and I was approaching the 6th night, so it was the afternoon, and I was kind of getting a bit tired of not being able to catch a bass, so I thought I'll stuff it, I'll break open some corn, and I'll fish off the bank during the night. So I've gone back to camp. I left my kayak and set up some lines just off the bank, and that was about 120 metres exactly from where I was camping, across a flat plain of just long grass, and that always floods every year, so you can imagine it was flat, and then I was on the track about 120 metres away from the river. I took dinner. The first time in 5 days, I started to get that feeling of like I felt someone was sneaking up on me, and I just kept on having to check over my shoulder and look down with the torch and down the track, and starting to get a little nervous, you could say. So once I'd finished dinner, I thought, look, it's about 9:30, it's about 10 o'clock really. I thought I'll go check my lines, I'll bring them in if there's no fish on it, but I'll crank this fire, because I was there all week and I'm an arborist, so I had heaps of split wood and I was chainsawing logs and stuff like that up. I put a shit ton of timber on this fire, and it was big, because I wanted to be able to watch my camp when I wasn't in it, for that weird reason I felt someone was there. Did catch a fish actually, but it got away on a submerged tree, so I was pulling it all in, I was quite happy, and before I walked back to camp, I just turned all my lights off. I got a couple of good torches with me, and I just turned it all off, and I was just soaking up the atmosphere. It was beautiful. There was a full moon. The valley was beautiful. It was dark. You could only see the stars and then the ridge tops of the mountains around me in this valley. Anyway, and as I was admiring my camp, because it was a beautiful glow, the camp looked like the sun. You know, in the midst of blackness, it was just a beautiful sight with the fire glowing, lots of light around it, catching the canopy of the trees. And I've seen, as I was looking back at camp, I've seen just this massive explosion of embers coming up. And I thought, oh, wow, that was a big log that rolled over. But the embers continued to go, and I thought, why are they doing that? And just strangely looking at it, thinking, you know, it looked like, you know, when you get a blower and you put it into a fire and it just explodes with embers? That was happening. Unless you were hitting it with a shovel or something, it just continued exploding up. And I'm like, what the hell? And at that moment, I've seen a black silhouette, which was there, but I hadn't noticed it, because this was, remember, 120 metres away. I saw a black silhouette walk across the fire, and it was carrying something aflame in its hand. So anyway, within a second, that flame extinguished, and I froze in fear, and I thought, holy crap, there's somebody in my camp. And that's probably why I was feeling so nervous. So anyway, I put my lead lenser torch on straight away. I got this really big one, and I put that on and flooded the campsite with light. But the only thing I could see were 3 reflective eyes, 3 sets of eyes in a tree, in the leuca tree, in between camp and myself. And I didn't care about the eyes. I was looking for that guy. I couldn't see anyone moving. The 2 eyes on the outside just looked like normal marsupials, like a possum or something. But the eyes in the middle were lower, but they were a massive, massive difference, like further apart. And the eyes were actually very round, and the colour was different. The colour of the little eyes of the marsupials, I'm guessing, were more of an orangey colour, but the eyes of the larger eyes were crisp yellow, leaning towards a whiter tinge of yellow, and they blinked. And I just, actually, at that moment, because I was worried about the guy more so, I was just thinking, shit, is that a panther in a tree? Because, you know, the panthers always come up in stories. So I was, at that point, really terrified. I waited there for a while because I thought, if there's somebody at my camp, at least I've got my fishing kayak, I can escape downriver, since my ute was back at camp. So as I waited, I think I waited for about half an hour or something, an hour, and I thought, well, this is stupid, I can't sit here all night. So I walked back towards camp with both of my torches scanning from left to right at different times, so I could look everywhere. And I couldn't see anything, couldn't see anyone, couldn't see any other tracks other than my own, because I had boots on. I recognised the particular tread. And I thought, that's sneaky, that was freaky, and because it was sneaky, it was terrifying. but I also thought maybe he's scared of me, so I was let it be. I was playing a lot of music. Like when I'm in the bush, I play a lot of good music. And that night in particular, I was playing a lot of opera, which is weird, I know. So anyway, I was in my tent. I don't remember how long I was in my tent before I started hearing funny things, but it was in the first hour, not even. It didn't take long at all for me to... And I already had the panther on my mind at that point. They were a big set of eyes. Then I hear... It dead set, I hear this thud on the back of my ute. So I've got a tray, big four drive ute with a tray. You know when, say, you're outside and you hear a cat jump onto your tray? It goes... Boom. Times that by like 5. It went boom, and I'm like, fucking me, that's a big cat. Because you can tell it was a cat, and no other animal I know of jumps up onto something like that. So I thought, maybe it's a feral cat, in which case I've got nothing to worry about, it's all good. My ears were just pricked up, I was listening to everything. There wasn't any, at night on that river, the only thing you'll ever hear at night is the odd wallaby jumping through the bush or wombat. That's the only noises you hear. And so for me to hear that thud on my ute, I was just like, wow, something's around the campsite. I wish I had motion cameras out to pick all this up. Not long after that, I heard, it would have been about half an hour after that, I heard clawing on a tree. And I was surrounded by melaleuca trees. So that's the paperbark tree, and it's real thick with that papery bark. It sounded exactly like a cat clawing at a cat pole. And I thought, what the hell? There is definitely a panther outside. I'd put it down to just, I'm definitely going to see the panther tonight, I think. And I was a bit nervous, but I was okay with it. So that was those two noises. The next thing I seen was somebody moving. So I was just staring at my camp. The fire had died down to just a big bed of coals at this point. The fire light had gone and it was just a red bed of coals. But it was still enough moonlight for me to see, as I was just looking out my tent window, I seen somebody squatting down. If you can imagine a person facing yourself, they'll squat down, like bend their legs, almost as if they're squatting all the way down, but they're walking sideways like a crab, so that the legs went like almost like a strafe, I think they call it. So sideways, crabbing sideways, but so fast. And the minute the person walked away from the fire, I was thinking, is this person like some ninja or something? Because I didn't hear one noise. I just heard movement. I didn't hear steps. And I seen that thing strafe sideways and then strafe the other way back out of there. As soon as that flash had gone, the fire started burning, just like as if you put a milk bottle on the fire. You know, that instant flame? And I thought, somebody just put something in my fire. And anyway, that just completely just made me freeze and think, what the hell's going on? And is someone messing with me? For the rest of that night, I didn't see anything else, but I heard strange things going on in the bushes around me. There was noises around that made me stay awake. I did not get 1 minute of sleep that night. When the sun started to come up, I was out of the tent because I hadn't slept, and I was just like, wow, I was so glad to be alive. And I was thinking, what the hell was that? So curious as to what happened that I stupidly stayed another day. But what I did from the get-go on that day, I didn't go fishing. I made a bit like Home Alone 2, you know, where he prepared the house for those criminals. I prepared my campsite, so I scattered leaves all the way around behind my tent. Any blind site I had in my tent, I was covering with dead leaves. Then, so there was a bit of sand. There was a lot of grass where I was, but mostly it was dust. So every time I'd come back to camp, you'd usually see a snake trail going across your from your kitchen to the tent. Right?
Setting up traps like Home Alone.
Yeah, I was not trapped. I just put leaves around so I could hear things that were moving around my tent, you know, just to wake me up. And if there was someone near me. And anyway, at that point, I'd just recently replaced the four-wheel drive tyres on my ute, and they were leaving really big track marks. So I drove up and down for a while, 15 minutes, to make sure every bit of dust was covered in my wheel tracks. It made it easier to see any animal tracks, if you can picture that. And long story short, I was heading into the second night. So I was pretty nervous. You could say, a lot of people do say to me, why the hell did you stay the second night? And I can't answer that. I don't know. But I did. And I'll tell you what, the sun went down and I was running a bit late. And I seriously, I went into my tent not long after sunset. It was pretty soon, very, very soon, in fact, after the sun had gone down, that I seen this shadow. I was just looking straight out of my window across the fire. The fire was to the left, and I was looking across to the river, and I seen a shadow that didn't mean much to me at the time, but as it started growing taller, I thought, holy shit, that shadow's growing. And as it got closer, it's still about 10 metres away. I was trying so hard to focus on it. It was getting closer. Eventually stopped right behind my ute, and I sent you that drawing. Do you still have that drawing I sent you?
I may need to ask you to send that again.
But this silhouette, that's all it was. It was a silhouette, not black, but just like a grey-coloured silhouette. It was a smoky colour. That's how I've described it in the past. It was a smoky-coloured silhouette. And it had quite a large head, and really, like, the shoulders were broad. All I could really see the outline of was the head, the shoulders, and then down a little bit, sort of level with the ute. And it just stood there. And I was thinking to myself, like, this is really bizarre. I was freaking out. I was that scared that I managed to get up onto sitting. I had my swag inside my tent, and I managed to sit up, and I propped my body up with my shoulder, and I was trying to focus as hard as I could through the fly screen of this silhouette, thinking, this is the end of my life. I was so scared. Didn't know what the intentions were of this thing. Then I started to focus on, because it wasn't moving, I saw this tinge, this little red tinge coming from the head. It was a little light. It's got a glowing eye. I only saw one glow, and I was just looking at this shadow, just thinking, holy shit, it's got a glowing eye, and it was small and very, very dim, and it was in the shape of a diamond. Now, when I stumbled across your website, a lot of the stories were saying a lot of the stuff that, and this probably said a lot, that it sounded a lot like what I had seen that night. But there was that military man who was talking about an exercise in the military that they were practicing in Jamison Valley, and he was interacting with this big one for about 4 days. Do you remember that story?
Yes, I know it well.
He mentioned right at the end of it of a red glowing eye, and my jaw dropped a little bit, and I was just listening, a lot of intent, thinking to myself, please say it was in the shape of a diamond. Please say it was in the shape of a diamond. And that was the exact thing that he said next. He said it was in the shape of a diamond. And my jaw dropped. I reckon my jaw nearly hit my feet. It was almost like I wanted to start convulsing or spewing, but I couldn't. I was just in shock. I thought, these things are real, and someone else has seen exactly what I've seen. And so everything changed from that moment on, and that's when I contacted you. I thought, I need to talk to you about it, because how good is it when you can get answers of weird things that have happened in your life previously? This presence was behind my ute looking at me for more than a few minutes. There was just silence. There was no noise at all. I was just thinking, why the hell did I stay the extra night? Now I'm dead. And this thing was big. And I'm just trembling, not even trembling with fear. I think I was just struck stiff with fear. When you're scared and you're trying to stay hidden from something that you know is dangerous, you can't breathe through your nose. You've got to breathe through your mouth, and you've got to try and make it quiet. And then because this was going for so long, my mouth was dry, and I didn't want to swallow because the swallow would make a noise or it could make me cough. So it was a real hard battle to stay quiet inside my tent while I'm shitting myself. And anyway, then the next thing I know, I see this shadow. I'm looking at the silhouette and the glowing eye, and all of a sudden it just started going straight down towards the ground as if it was just melting into the earth, right? Smooth action, just going down. And this thing floated downwards, and then floating from standing up, going to lying down position, and then it just floated under my ute. Yeah, the shape and the eye moved together. That thing just floated under my ute. After 2.5 years later, when I finally hear about these stories and I start putting all these pieces together, I drew it out. And when I drew it out, I realised that hairy man didn't float underneath my ute. It went down and, as it was crouching, moved sideways. But to me, for 2.5 years, I thought something floated under my ute. But when I think about it, really, if it was a person, something living, it just went down and then moved to the left, to its left. I didn't know where it went, and I was not game to move from where I was to open the tent. And so I just stayed quiet and hoped that thing never came back, because I thought it was a monster. And then before I knew it, I seen a little person the size of a child. And as I was looking out the window, I didn't hear any noises. I just seen this, the little figure was probably about 5 foot tall. It was a very, very tiny thing. This thing walked over all of the leaves that I'd placed out with not a noise. I stood next to my window with its back to the tent and squatted. So it was like somebody squatting outside my tent facing away from me. And I'm thinking, this is it. This is where they're going to come in my tent and you know what I mean? Your mind goes ballistic with all the ideas and possibilities. And terrified, as I was seeing it started to move and motion and twist its body to look inside the tent, all I saw of the face was silver patterns coming from the inside of the centre of the face where a nose would be and the mouth, and they flared out. So silver patterns curving and flaring out towards the cheeks, going up. Like it looked to me like a Maori type of mask. You know those big masks they carve? And it was like a big face, but not too big, but just black with these white lines, and I could see eyes, and that's all. And I could see something in the mouth there that was a lighter colour, but I couldn't see any detail, unfortunately. And I just thought it was, in my mind, that what I was looking at, I thought it was a picture of some weird imp-looking demon thing looking at me through the tent, trying to freak me out. And I thought, oh, this is intense. Is this place haunted or something? As this face is looking at me, it only stayed there for a couple of moments and then turned back around and disappeared without any noise. At this point, I was thinking of my family.
Nothing else happened? You woke up in the morning, you packed up and you left?
Yeah, pretty much. I was the second night was the worst of the two. I was just full of fear, and to tell you the truth, I'd been up for 2 nights in a row at that point, and I just thought, I'm so tired, I'm out of here. It was meant to be a 7-day solo camp, but I left on day 8.
You mentioned, I think it was on the 6th night, you had this feeling you dread like someone was watching you.
Yeah, that was before I went and seen, I remember I walked to the river and got my fishing lines in, and I felt all that night, from dinner onwards, I did feel like someone was watching me. Every couple of minutes I was looking over my shoulder as I was washing all the camp oven and all that, you know. And so that's why I made the fire bigger than normal, so I could see around my fire when I walked to the river.
These flames that were coming up from the fire, these abnormal sparks and embers, etc., was this before you saw the silhouette or after? Before.
So that's what got my attention. As I was looking at the stars and the valley and the ridgeline, and I was admiring how good my camp looked, really, in the blackness of the valley. There was this little ball of light, and it just looked really warming. I was actually quite proud of myself. I thought, you know, here I am out in the bush, just living it up on my own. You know, that real feeling you get when you look back and you think, oh, you know, this sounds embarrassing, but you think, oh, I feel like a real man. You know what I mean? I'm really impressed with what I've done this week. I've made a kick-ass camp. I've done some real crafty things with some setups of walls, making walls around the fire and all that. That's when I noticed the embers coming out of the fire. They didn't stop. It was as if like you'd get a big, you know, when you see an explosion go up and it mushrooms. You know, that's what embers do.
But this was unnatural. It just kept going.
That it continued. That's what was unnatural. Yeah, I thought, why is it doing that? It just it wasn't a log rolling over. It was as if someone was there hitting the fire with a shovel or something. Or poking it with a rod. There was just movement going up. I've heard another story of one of your audios of somebody who's seen, there was the old fire hand.
Yeah.
And there's 3 videos on it, and I thought, that's exactly what I saw. And now, because I didn't think it would be someone whacking the fire with their hands. Who does that? Silhouette had very tall legs. See where the legs went up and finished? Because I've seen the legs going either side of the fire. You could see the fire through the legs, and I thought at that moment, without thinking, I just knew, gee, it's a tall person because his crutch is way off the ground. and he would be like within a metre or two of the fire. I just thought, wow, the person's tall.
How tall would you estimate him to have been?
On the second night, when I seen the silhouette behind my ute with the red diamond, I estimated it would be nearly 1.5 times me, and I'm 6 foot exactly. And this thing would have been about another metre on me. Now, that's about 9 feet exactly. It was almost like 2 men wide. That's why I thought it was weird, because I thought, well, it's not a person because it was so bloody wide. But, so I'd just seen the head, and it was a dome-shaped head, and then I've seen some shoulders, and then I've seen the vertical lines coming straight down from the shoulders, and below the ute, I couldn't see anything. I only saw the top half of his silhouette. When I seen the silhouette walk across the fire, I knew that it was somebody in my camp. When I seen the eyes, when I put the torch on it, I knew at that point human eyes don't reflect, so I was trying to find that guy. But when I go back to it in my mind and think about it, and then, even then, straight away, I knew there was something very abnormal with the eyes in the middle of the tree that were wide and set apart, quite wide apart, far apart. Seeing 2 different sized beings that night. So this little thing, when it crouched outside my window, its head, the height of its head, was exactly the middle of the window. So if I stood outside, the height of that, where his head was when it was crouching, would be my waist. So it was a very little thing. So I seriously thought it was like an imp. Without seeing the face, I thought it was like a little imp at the time. I thought it was like an imp demon, you know. Luckily the moon was high, and that was enough to get a little bit of... it must have had hair on its face, because if it was skin shines in moonlight. It's a dead giveaway if you're stalking something, your skin. When you get hair that shines under moonlight, because moonlight's nice and soft, so when you get moonlight hitting hair, it sort of gives it a gleam. It doesn't shine. It's sort of a... So that's all I saw. When the thing turned, it was a very slow turn to look at me. All I saw I did see that there were eyes there, and the eyes were they stood out to me. And then all I could see was a silvery top of, as if he'd gotten a pencil and drawn a couple of whisker-shaped patterns coming from the nose area to the outside with a bend in it, like a concave bend. This is a good way to describe it. I knew that there was eyes there, right, because it was a head, but the part around the eyes was brighter than the eyes themselves. The eyes on this thing wasn't glowing. Above the eyes were catching the moonlight, and something on the cheeks was catching the moonlight.
You said that it turned and looked at you. Does that mean it was side on to you at that stage? It turned and looked in the window?
So before it turned, it had its back to me, squatting on its feet, like someone squatting, and its back was right up against my tent. So if I had have pushed my hand through the soft tent, it would have touched the body within like 200 mil or 100 mil. So it was right next to my tent, and then it just twisted. The feet stayed there. It turned to its right and looked in through the window. So when it was squatting, it was to the left of my window, and it turned around and peered through my window, and I could only see the face and the twisted part of the body, because I saw it moving and put a shadow on my... I saw the shadow, but I couldn't hear anything. Nothing. I put like 100 mil of dead leaves there, and I don't know how it didn't make noise. That's what made me think it was a ghost. There were no tracks in the morning. None. I remember thinking, if this is people, these are either ninjas or military-trained people, because, they are so quiet. They are very good and quick. The figure I seen on the first night was Crabbing Man. Oh, God, that was fast. The way he moved to and from the fire, it was unphysical. So it made me think it couldn't have been something alive. Do you know what I mean? Now, I've thought about this. I believe now that I've seen Sasquatch, right, the Yowie. Some of the descriptions you hear of people's descriptions of its appearance, they say a lighter coloured belly and chest, maybe not so hairy. Now, when I picture that makes everything I see make sense. Because all I saw was a lightness surrounded by darkness, with the dark legs moving like a crab, sideways. And it moved that quick, I didn't get to see any of it, because there was no flame, remember? it put something in the fire, and it didn't start burning till about half a second after. By that time, it was out of there. So it was like a in, out.
You were there pretty much praying for your life. I know what that's all about.
100%. I was praying, mate. I
praying for daylight.
I was praying for everything. I didn't stop praying that whole night, I'm telling you. I was so scared.
Coming back to these diamond-shaped eyes, you saw a red-tinged light.
Mm?
You only saw
It's
one,
very
though.
dim.
You only saw one.
Yeah, isn't that odd? Well, it was in its head shape because I could see the outline of the head. Man, it wasn't that far from the top of the head, so I'd have to say 8 and 3/4 foot.
Would you presume that the head may have been on an angle where you could only see one eye?
I've thought about that since hearing about this, and I thought, well, maybe it was on its side. But even if it was on its side, it still had really broad shoulders that were wide apart, wider than a human, wider than any man I've ever seen in my life. And so I thought, well, if it had to have its head twisted, it still has wide shoulders. So maybe I've thought of other scenarios where it was square facing me, but maybe its head was looking up the track. I think I dead set no, he was looking straight at me because he was standing right in line with my tent. It was a dome tent, and I didn't have there's no covers or anything. The doors are all fly screen, and I'm looking straight at it. So, yeah, I knew that whatever it was facing me with its head. The only thing I can relate that to is communication type of noises between something and something else.
After this experience you had during this occasion, how has that made you feel about the Australian bush and what may be out there?
This question really bugs me because I love the bush so much, but sometimes I go to somewhere with the intent of staying there all night, and I haven't even gotten out of my car, and I've pushed that to the limits where I was thinking, like they say, if you're scared of flying, fly more. But and I've tried that, and nothing seems to. I think I'm always a little scared in the bush at night time now. One time I was getting so sick of being terrified that I thought, you know what, I'm going to nip this in the bud. And I walked out to Glenbrook Gorge. I only live up the road. I walked out to Glenbrook Gorge and I just stayed about 2 or 3 k's in, and I just sat there till the sun set. And my intent was to go there till it was 9 o'clock, all the sun's gone, and I was going to walk home in the dark. No big deal previously, but it was getting to the point now where I couldn't get out of my car wherever I was at night. So I had to do this, so I did that, and I thought I'd conquered my fear, but it only goes so far. So I'll go out to the bush now. Honestly, if I'm on my own, this sounds pathetic, but sometimes I've even stood on the side steps of my ute just to take a leak because I didn't want to stand underneath my ute. You know, like a child when you're a kid, you get scared of something under your bed, and so you run and jump to your bed.
It sounds like it's had a profound effect on you.
Mate, it changed my life, and I tried to reason with it by just putting it down to something that I could half understand, as in like spirits. But when I found out about your site, and I'd heard a couple of stories. When I heard the Firehand story, I thought, Jesus Christ, I've got to tell these people about what I've seen because that's what happened to me. And then when I heard, and I was a bit anxious about it, I didn't make any moves, but when I heard that story about the red eyes, I just thought, I actually wrote you that email about 10 minutes after it. But I mean, I can be, I wept all that night. I didn't sleep that night. I was glued to the YouTube, your YouTube channel, and seriously, I was crying when I was watching some of these videos.
You're not the first one.
And then all through the next day, there'd be random times when I just sorry, it's hitting me now, but I guess maybe it's a mixture of emotions of are these things out to hurt me, or are they friendly? Or am I safe in the bush now? Or I can't explain it, but sometimes all I can do is just feel this awesome feeling of overwhelmedness that I just can't explain it. I just hate it. I fucking hate it.
There's a lot of people who've needed therapy afterwards. A lot of people have PTSD. A lot of people struggle. Some people, on the other hand, they have a less traumatic experience and they deal with it quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I deal with it quite well until I really get into talking about it, and it brings all the emotion back, like now. Yeah. I can understand how some people would need therapy, but to tell you the truth, I couldn't talk to you. Once I made my mind up that it could have been a Yowie that I'd seen, I couldn't talk to you soon enough.